The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky terrain of Kepler 442b as Staff Sergeant Maya Chen adjusted her scope for the third time. Around her, the mixed alien coalition forces buzzed with nervous energy. The Zephyrian commanders, tall and blue-skinned with their trademark silver eyes, whispered among themselves in their clicking language. The Karathi, stocky and gray with thick armor plating, shook their massive heads in what she had learned was their version of disbelief. Human. Commander Zekthar of the Zephyrians approached her position, his four arms gesturing dismissively. Your species continues to surprise us with your optimism. But this target is beyond even our most advanced technology. 4,000 meters through atmospheric interference, wind variations, and gravitational anomalies. It cannot be done. Maya didn't look up from her rifle. The weapon was human-made, looking primitive compared to the sleek energy weapons carried by their alien allies. It fired solid projectiles using chemical propellant, a concept that had amused the coalition forces when humans first joined the galactic community 3 years ago. With respect, sir, you said the same thing about the 3-kilometer shot on Proxima Station. The Karathi Field Marshal Grondak stomped closer with heavy footsteps. That was different. This is Kepler 442b. The gravity here is 1.3 times your Earth normal. The atmosphere has unpredictable thermal layers. Our orbital bombardment systems cannot achieve the precision required for this mission. How can one small human with an ancient kinetic weapon succeed where our technology fails? Maya finally looked up, her dark eyes calm and focused. She was smaller than average even for a human, barely 5 feet tall and weighing maybe 120 pounds. Among the towering Zephyrians and the bulky Karathi, she looked like a child playing soldier. But those who had served with her before knew better than to judge by appearances. Because, she said simply, my weapon doesn't rely on computers or targeting systems that can be fooled by atmospheric interference. It relies on understanding the environment and working with it instead of fighting against it. The target in question was a Vorthan command bunker built into the side of a mountain across a vast canyon. The enemy had chosen their position well. The bunker was situated exactly 4,227 meters from the closest approach possible for coalition forces. Their intelligence indicated that the Vorthan military leader responsible for the genocide of the Centauri colonies was inside, planning another strike. Orbital bombardment was impossible due to the civilian population nearby. Assault shuttles couldn't get close enough without being shot down by the defensive systems. But there was a single ventilation shaft, barely half a meter wide, that connected to the command center. If someone could place an explosive device through that shaft, the resulting chain reaction would collapse the specific section housing the command center while leaving the rest of the civilian areas untouched. The catch was the shot. 4,000 meters through hostile atmosphere to hit a target the size of a dinner plate. The mission parameters are clear, Zekthar continued, his silver eyes reflecting doubt. We need a precision delivery system for the micro-explosive. Our plasma rifles lose coherence at this distance. Our particle beams scatter in the atmospheric interference. Even our most advanced targeting drones cannot maintain accuracy at this range in these conditions. Maya stood up slowly, checking her equipment one final time. Her rifle was a modified Barrett M1007A1, upgraded with advanced materials, but still fundamentally the same design humans had been perfecting for over a century. The scope was human technology, too, though it incorporated some alien improvements in lens clarity and range finding. I've been studying the atmospheric data for 3 days, she said, shouldering the massive rifle with practiced ease despite her small frame. The thermal layers create predictable wind patterns every 47 minutes. The gravitational anomalies follow a cycle based on the two moons' position. In 6 minutes, all conditions will align for a 12-second window. The Zephyrian shook his head. Even if your calculations are correct, which our computers suggest they are not, the margin for error is 0. 1 degree off target and the mission fails. The Vorthans escape, and another billion civilians die in their next attack. I understand the stakes, Maya replied, moving to her firing position. She had chosen a rocky outcrop that provided stability and the correct angle. The alien forces had offered her their advanced bipods and stabilization systems, but she had declined. Her rifle was set up on a simple human bipod with sandbags for additional support. The explosive device she needed to deliver was no larger than a golf ball, but packed with enough force to collapse the specific tunnel system they needed to hit. It was attached to a specially designed projectile that would fragment upon impact, sending the explosive through the ventilation shaft at precisely the right angle. "Humans," Grondok muttered to his aide in what he thought was a private conversation. "They still believe in individual skill over superior technology. It is admirable but foolish." Maya heard the comment but didn't respond. She had learned early in her military career that actions spoke louder than arguments. Besides, she was busy calculating wind speed, humidity, temperature gradients, and a dozen other factors that would affect her bullet's flight path over the next 4 kilometers. The other coalition snipers had already given their assessments. The Zephyrian marksmen, with their natural ability to see in multiple spectrums and their quantum targeting systems, declared the shot impossible due to atmospheric distortion. The Karathi heavy weapons specialists, known throughout the galaxy for their precision artillery, stated that no kinetic weapon could maintain accuracy at such distance given the planetary conditions. But Maya had advantages they didn't understand. She had grown up hunting in the mountains of Montana, learning to read wind patterns by watching grass and leaves. She had spent years perfecting her craft on Earth's varied terrains, from the humid jungles of South America to the thin air of the Himalayas. Most importantly, she understood something her alien allies didn't. Sometimes the oldest technology, refined through generations of human experience, could outperform the newest innovations. 2 minutes to optimal window, announced the tactical officer, a nervous young Zephyrian whose voice clicked with anxiety. Maya settled into her position, feeling the familiar weight of the rifle against her shoulder. Around her, she could hear the alien forces placing bets on whether she would even come close to the target. The odds, she gathered, were heavily against her. She closed her eyes and began to breathe deeply, letting her heart rate slow to its optimal rhythm. This was a technique she had learned from an old Marine sniper instructor who had taught her that the body was as important as the weapon. Every heartbeat moved the rifle slightly. Every breath shifted her position. She needed to time her shot between heartbeats, at the natural pause between exhale and inhale. 1 minute to window, came the announcement. Maya opened her eyes and looked through her scope. The target was barely visible even at maximum magnification, a small dark spot on the distant mountainside. She had memorized its exact position relative to the rock formations around it, because visual confirmation at this distance was nearly impossible. The wind meter on her rifle showed steady readings, but she knew that surface wind was different from the air currents at various altitudes her bullet would travel through. She watched the flags and banners around the enemy position through her scope, noting how they moved. She observed the heat shimmer rising from the canyon floor between her and the target. 30 seconds to optimal window, the tactical officer announced, his voice tight with tension. Maya made her final calculations, adjusting her scope by fractions of degrees. The bullet would take approximately 6 seconds to reach the target, during which it would drop over 8 meters due to gravity and drift several meters due to wind. She had to aim at a point in space where the target would be, not where it currently was. The alien forces around her had fallen silent. Even the skeptics were watching with intense curiosity. No one had ever attempted a shot like this under these conditions with primitive kinetic weapons. 10 seconds to window opening, came the call. Maya settled her breathing pattern and felt her heartbeat steady in her chest. Her finger found the trigger, applying exactly the right pressure. Too much, and the shot would be rushed. Too little, and she would miss the window entirely. Window is open. 12 seconds remaining. The mountain air was perfectly still for a moment, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. Through her scope, Maya could see the small, dark opening of the ventilation shaft, exactly where intelligence had said it would be. 4,127 meters away, according to her laser rangefinder. She took one final breath, let half of it out, and held the rest. Her heartbeat slowed to its minimum rhythm. Her muscles relaxed into perfect stability. The crosshairs in her scope aligned exactly where her calculations told her the bullet needed to go. The alien commanders watched in fascination and disbelief as the small human prepared to attempt what their most advanced technology had declared impossible. They had no idea they were about to witness something that would change their understanding of human capabilities forever. Maya's finger began its slow, steady pressure on the trigger as the optimal moment approached. The trigger reached its break point with a crisp, clean release. The rifle recoiled against Maya's shoulder with familiar force, the muzzle flash briefly lighting up the rocky outcrop. The sound of the shot echoed across the canyon like thunder, rolling between the mountain walls. But Maya didn't celebrate. She didn't even lift her eye from the scope. 6 seconds. That's how long it would take for her bullet to cross the 4-kilometer gap. 6 seconds during which physics, wind, gravity, and atmospheric pressure would all have their say in whether her shot would find its mark. The alien observers held their collective breath. Through their various optical devices and sensors, they tracked the bullet's flight path. The Zephyrian sensors could follow the projectile for the first 2 kilometers before atmospheric interference caused them to lose the signal. The Karathi heavy weapons specialists shook their heads as their targeting computers showed the bullet drifting off what they calculated should be the correct trajectory. Human ballistics do not account for the gravitational variance, Grondok muttered to his aide. The projectile is following an incorrect path. But Maya remained motionless, still watching through her scope. She had fired thousands of shots in conditions around the galaxy, and she understood something her alien allies didn't. The bullet wasn't following the wrong path. It was following exactly the path she had calculated, accounting for factors that the alien computer systems either didn't consider or couldn't properly measure. 5 seconds. The bullet was now traveling through the thermal layer that created the most atmospheric distortion. Zephyrian sensors showed wild fluctuations in the projectile's apparent position. Their computers declared the shot a certain miss, the trajectory too far off target to be effective. 4 seconds. The bullet passed through the gravitational anomaly created by the intersection of the 2 moons' pull. Karathi calculations showed this should have pulled the projectile significantly off course. But Maya had observed something during her 3 days of study that the aliens' instruments had missed. The gravitational effect wasn't random. It followed a precise pattern that could be predicted and compensated for. 3 seconds. The bullet was now in the final phase of its journey, dropping fast as gravity took its toll on the projectile's velocity. The aliens watching through their optical devices could see nothing at this distance. Their most advanced sensors had lost track entirely. As far as their technology was concerned, the shot had already failed. 2 seconds. Maya's breathing remained controlled and steady. Through her scope, she couldn't see the bullet either, but she didn't need to. She had done everything she could. The rest was up to physics and the countless hours of training that had taught her to read conditions that couldn't be measured by instruments alone. 1 second. Commander Zekthar was already preparing to console the human on her valiant attempt. The Karathi field marshal was calculating how long it would take to evacuate the area before the Vorthons realized they had been discovered. None of them were watching the distant mountainside anymore. The shot had clearly missed. Then, exactly 6.2 seconds after Maya had pulled the trigger, a small flash of light appeared on the distant mountain. It was tiny, barely visible even through their optical enhancement devices. For a moment, the alien commanders thought it might be reflected sunlight or an optical illusion. The explosion came 3 seconds later. Not the small flash of the bullet impact, but a massive eruption that lit up the entire mountainside as the micro-explosive device detonated inside the ventilation system. The chain reaction Maya had described began immediately, with secondary explosions following in precise sequence as the tunnel system collapsed in on itself. The alien forces stared in stunned silence as a section of the mountain face crumbled inward. Dust and debris shot from hidden openings as the carefully calculated collapse destroyed exactly the area their intelligence had indicated while leaving the civilian sections completely untouched. "Impossible," whispered Grondok, his voice barely audible over the rumbling of the distant avalanche. Maya finally lifted her eye from the scope and sat back on her heels. She worked the bolt of her rifle, ejecting the spent cartridge, and engaged the safety. Her movements were calm and methodical, showing none of the excitement or surprise that gripped the alien observers. "Confirmed impact," came the voice of the orbital surveillance team over the communication system. "Target is neutralized. The command center has been completely destroyed. No civilian casualties detected. Mission successful." Commander Zekthar turned to stare at the small human, who was now calmly cleaning her rifle with a small cloth. His 4 arms gestured in the Zephyrian expression for complete bewilderment. "How did you know the bullet would compensate for the gravitational anomaly?" Maya looked up from her weapon maintenance. "I didn't compensate for it, I used it. The gravitational pull from your moons doesn't just affect the bullet randomly. It follows a predictable pattern. If you time it right, the pull actually helps correct the trajectory instead of throwing it off." The Karathi field marshal approached slowly, his heavy footsteps crunching on the rocky ground. "Our computers modeled every possible variable. The atmospheric interference alone should have made accurate targeting impossible at this distance." "Your computers tried to fight the atmosphere," Maya replied, reassembling her rifle with practiced efficiency. "I worked with it. The thermal layers don't just cause random distortion. They create air currents that follow the mountain topography. If you understand how the mountains channel the wind, you can use those currents to help guide your shot." She stood up and shouldered her rifle, checking her other equipment. "Besides, my rifle doesn't rely on electronic targeting systems that can be fooled by electromagnetic interference or atmospheric distortion. It uses basic physics and human observation. Sometimes the old ways work better than the new ones." The alien forces were still processing what they had witnessed when the communication system crackled to life again. "All units, be advised. Long-range sensors detect incoming Vorthan reinforcements. Multiple attack squadrons approaching from orbit, ETA 14 minutes. Commander Zekthar immediately began issuing orders to his troops. The successful strike had eliminated their primary target, but now they needed to evacuate before enemy reinforcements arrived. The coalition forces had expected this possibility and had prepared contingency plans. But as the aliens began their organized withdrawal, Maya remained at her position, adjusting her scope settings and checking her ammunition supply. "Human soldier," Grondok called out, "the mission is complete. We must evacuate immediately." Maya looked up from her preparations. "The primary target is down, yes, but intelligence reports indicated 3 secondary command posts in this sector. The Vorthans will retreat to one of those positions to reorganize their forces." She pulled out a detailed topographical map, covered in handwritten notes and calculations. "I've been studying the terrain and their likely escape routes. There are 3 possible positions they'll fall back to. 2 of them are within range." Zekthar's silver eyes widened in disbelief. "You cannot be serious. You have already accomplished what we thought was impossible. To attempt multiple long-range shots against targets that may or may not exist, while under pressure from incoming enemy forces, would be beyond reckless." "The Vorthans are responsible for genocide," Maya replied quietly. her voice carrying a hardness that made the alien commanders take notice. 3 billion civilians died in the Centauri system because we missed opportunities like this. I won't let that happen again. She pointed to her map, showing the calculated positions. The first fallback position is at 3,800 meters southeast of here. The second is at 4,200 meters to the northeast. Based on the explosion pattern and the direction of their evacuation routes, they'll most likely head for the southeastern position first. The Karathi field marshal studied her calculations with grudging respect. Even if your analysis is correct, you would be attempting these shots while under fire from incoming aircraft. No sniper can maintain accuracy under such conditions. Maya was already moving to a new position that would give her sight lines to both potential targets. I've been under fire before. The key is not to let the pressure change your fundamentals. Breathing, heart rate, trigger control. Those don't change whether you're on a quiet range or in the middle of a firefight. As she set up her new position, the alien forces reluctantly began establishing a defensive perimeter around her. They still thought the human was attempting something impossible, but they had just watched her accomplish one impossible shot. Perhaps she could do it again. The sound of approaching aircraft began to echo across the canyon as Vorthon reinforcements closed in on their position. Maya settled behind her rifle once more, studying the distant mountainside through her scope. Somewhere among those rocks and caves, the surviving enemy commanders were regrouping, planning their next atrocity. She had 12 minutes before the enemy aircraft would be in weapons range of their position, 12 minutes to find her targets and prevent another genocide. As the alien forces prepared for combat around her, Maya began her calculations for what would be the most challenging shots of her career. 8 minutes until the Vorthon aircraft would be in weapons range. Maya had identified movement at the southeastern fallback position through her scope. Heat signatures from the alien surveillance drones confirmed it. The surviving enemy commanders had retreated to exactly where her calculations had predicted they would go. The distance was 3,812 meters according to her laser rangefinder. Closer than her first shot, but the conditions had changed dramatically. The approach of the Vorthon aircraft had altered the atmospheric pressure patterns. Explosions from the collapsed command center were still sending debris and heat distortion into the air. Most challenging of all, she was now operating under extreme time pressure, with enemy forces converging on their position. "Contact!" shouted one of the Zephyrian perimeter guards. "Enemy ground forces moving up the eastern approach. Multiple vehicles. Estimated battalion strength." Commander Zekthar spoke rapidly into his communication device while keeping one eye on Maya. "Orbital support? We need immediate extraction. Human sniper is attempting additional long-range eliminations, but we're about to be overrun." Maya ignored the chaos around her. She had learned long ago that external pressure was just another environmental factor to account for, like wind or gravity. Her breathing remained steady as she studied the distant fallback position through her scope. The target area was a natural cave system that provided excellent protection from orbital bombardment, but had one crucial vulnerability. Intelligence reports had shown that the cave's main entrance funneled all traffic through a narrow opening barely 3 meters wide. If she could time her shot correctly, she could catch the enemy commanders as they established their new command post. 6 minutes until air support arrival, announced the tactical officer, his voice tight with stress. Enemy aircraft are beginning their attack runs on our position. The first energy blasts from Vorthon fighters began impacting the mountainside around them. The alien coalition forces returned fire with their plasma rifles and particle cannons, filling the air with the distinctive whine and crack of energy weapons. Through it all, Maya remained motionless behind her rifle, calculating wind patterns and atmospheric pressure changes caused by the heat from the energy weapons. She had loaded a different type of ammunition for this shot. The round was designed to fragment upon impact, creating multiple projectiles that would spread through the cave opening to maximize the chance of eliminating multiple targets. It was a technique she had developed during the siege of the Rigel stations, where precision was less important than ensuring no enemy commanders escaped. "Movement confirmed at target location," reported the surveillance drone operator. "Multiple heat signatures entering the cave system. Command personnel identified by their biosignatures." Maya made a final adjustment to her scope and settled into her firing position. Around her, the battle was intensifying. Karathi heavy weapons teams were setting up their plasma cannons to engage the approaching ground forces. Zephyrian squads were using their natural agility to move between cover positions, their energy rifles laying down suppressing fire against the enemy aircraft. But Maya had trained herself to function in exactly this type of chaos. During her early military career, she had learned that combat shooting was entirely different from range shooting. The fundamentals remained the same, but everything else required adaptation. The key was maintaining focus on what mattered while filtering out what didn't. 5 minutes until enemy aircraft reached optimal attack position. 4 minutes until the ground forces would be close enough to overrun their position. Maya had maybe 2 minutes to make her shot before the extraction shuttles would have to leave with or without her. Through her scope, she could see figures moving in the cave entrance. The Vorthan commanders were setting up their equipment, establishing communication links with their remaining forces. They thought they were safe at this distance, protected by the natural cave structure from any possible attack. Maya's finger found the trigger. Her breathing slowed to the familiar rhythm she had perfected over thousands of shots. Her heart rate remained steady despite the explosions and energy blasts erupting around her position. This was what separated truly elite marksmen from merely good ones: the ability to maintain perfect consistency regardless of external conditions. She began her final breathing cycle. Inhale slowly. Exhale halfway. Hold. In that moment of perfect stillness between breaths, between heartbeats, she began her trigger squeeze. The rifle fired with its familiar crack and recoil. Maya immediately began working the bolt for a follow-up shot, knowing that her first round would take 5.3 seconds to reach the target. If the enemy commanders realized they were under fire and took cover, she would need a second shot ready immediately. Through her scope, she watched the distant cave entrance while counting down the bullet's flight time. 5 seconds, 4 seconds. The Vorthan figures were still visible, still setting up their equipment. 3 seconds. Still no indication they had detected the incoming threat. 2 seconds. One of the figures was moving toward the cave mouth, about to step into the exact center of her target area. The fragmentation round impacted the cave entrance exactly as Maya had calculated. The primary projectile struck the rock face above the opening, and the secondary fragments spread through the entrance area in a precisely controlled pattern. Through her scope, she saw the heat signatures in the cave disappear immediately. "Target eliminated," she reported calmly, already shifting her position to look for the third fallback location. "Confirmed elimination," came the voice from orbital surveillance. "All command personnel biosignatures have ceased. The northeastern position is showing movement now." Maya smiled grimly. Exactly as predicted. The third fallback position was the most challenging yet. 4,200 meters to the northeast, across a valley filled with thermal updrafts from geothermal vents. The atmospheric distortion would be severe, and the target was partially concealed behind rock formations. "Human!" Commander Zekthar called out over the sound of battle. "Extraction shuttles are inbound, but they cannot wait. We must leave in 90 seconds or we all die here." Maya was already calculating the angle and distance to the northeastern position. This would be her most difficult shot yet, under the worst possible conditions. Enemy fire was getting closer to her position. Atmospheric distortion was at its peak, and she had maybe one chance before they would have to evacuate. But as she looked through her scope at the distant mountainside, she thought about the 3 billion civilians who had died in the Centauri system. She thought about the genocide reports from the outer colonies. She thought about every innocent life that would be lost if even one enemy commander escaped to reorganize their forces. "60 seconds until extraction," called the tactical officer. Maya found her target through the scope, another cave entrance, this one even smaller than the last. The heat distortion from the geothermal vents made the image shimmer and dance, but she could see movement inside. The final group of enemy commanders, thinking they were safely beyond the range of any possible weapon. She loaded her last fragmentation round and settled into position one final time. Around her, the alien coalition forces were preparing to retreat, laying down covering fire as their extraction shuttles approached through the enemy aircraft formations. 45 seconds. Maya began her breathing cycle, letting her heart rate slow despite the chaos erupting around her position. A Vorthon energy blast struck the rocks just 10 meters from her position, showering her with stone fragments. She didn't flinch. 30 seconds. Her crosshairs aligned with the distant cave entrance. 4,217 meters, through atmospheric distortion that made the target appear to jump and shimmer. While under fire from multiple enemy positions, 20 seconds. Maya began her trigger squeeze, applying steady pressure while maintaining perfect sight alignment. The fundamentals never changed, regardless of the circumstances. Breathing, heart rate, sight picture, trigger control. 10 seconds. "Human soldier, we must go now!" shouted Grondok over the sound of approaching shuttles. Maya's rifle fired just as the extraction shuttle's engines began to drown out all other sounds. She worked the bolt one final time, safed her weapon, and grabbed her equipment bag in a single fluid motion. The coalition forces were already moving toward the landing zone, providing covering fire as the shuttles touched down under heavy enemy fire. Maya ran with them, her rifle slung across her back, while mentally counting down the flight time of her final shot. She was halfway to the shuttle when the distant explosion lit up the northeastern mountainside. Even at this distance, even through the chaos of the extraction, the flash was clearly visible. Her final shot had found its mark. As the shuttle lifted off with Maya and the coalition forces aboard, Commander Zekthar turned to the small human who was calmly cleaning her rifle, despite the fact that they were still taking fire from Vorthon aircraft. "3 shots," he said, his voice filled with something approaching awe. 3 impossible shots, at distances our most advanced technology cannot achieve. Under conditions that should have made accuracy impossible. How? Maya looked up from her weapon maintenance. Around her, the alien soldiers were staring at her with expressions she had seen before. It was the look people got when they realized that everything they thought they knew about human capabilities was wrong. "You want to know the real difference between human weapons and yours?" she asked, reassembling her rifle with practiced efficiency. "Your technology tries to eliminate every variable, control every condition, remove every uncertainty. But sometimes the variables are what make the shot possible." She gestured toward the window of the shuttle, where the scarred mountainside was disappearing behind them. "That gravitational anomaly your computers said would throw off my shot? I used it to correct for atmospheric drift. Those thermal updrafts that your sensors said would make targeting impossible, they follow predictable patterns if you know how to read them. Your advanced targeting systems couldn't adapt because they were trying to fight the environment instead of working with it." Grondok shook his massive head slowly. "But the distances, the atmospheric interference, the pressure of combat, are just factors to account for," Maya finished. "Like any other environmental conditions, the principles don't change whether you're shooting at 100 meters on a calm day or at 4,000 meters under fire. Breathing, sight alignment, trigger control, follow-through. Master the fundamentals, and everything else is just mathematics." She slid her cleaned rifle back into its case and leaned back in her seat. "Besides, you told me it was impossible. Humans have a particular talent for proving that word wrong." Commander Zekthar was quiet for a long moment, processing what he had witnessed. Finally, he spoke again. "The Galactic Council has been debating whether to approve human requests for expanded military roles in coalition forces. There have been concerns about your species' reliance on primitive kinetic weapons and unconventional tactics. Maya smiled. And now? Now, Zekthar said, I believe those concerns have been thoroughly addressed. As the shuttle climbed toward orbit, leaving behind the scarred battlefield where a single human had accomplished what an entire alien coalition had thought impossible, Maya closed her eyes and allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Somewhere in the galaxy, 3 billion civilians would wake up tomorrow because a small woman with an old rifle had proved that impossible was just another word for challenging. The mission reports would spread through the Galactic Council within hours. Military academies across dozens of worlds would study the engagement, trying to understand how primitive human technology had succeeded where advanced alien systems had failed. Defense contractors would scramble to reverse engineer human small arms manufacturing techniques. But Maya knew they would miss the most important point. It wasn't about the technology. It wasn't about the weapons or the calculations or the environmental factors. It was about something uniquely human, the absolute refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible when lives hung in the balance. In the end, that was what humanity, really meant. Not that humans were better than other species, but that when faced with impossible odds, impossible distances, and impossible shots, humans would line up their sights and pull the trigger anyway. And sometimes, just sometimes, impossible would become inevitable.